Finding the force is a daily practice. The ayahuasca can kick the door open for you so that you know where to find it, but you have to build your own spiritual muscles. The mind is the yoke between the spirit plane and the body, right? And you have to build those muscles yourself. I would say the most important thing to know is the medicine does have this kind of what have you done for me lately attitude. Like, if you're not coming to the dance able to do your part, she's not going to do anything for you that you haven't done for yourself or that you wouldn't do for her. So, by honoring the medicine, by loving the mother, by finding the force on your own, you're honoring the sacredness of it. And you're going to get a lot more out of it too, because you've done your spiritual push ups. So.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Psychedelic Conversations. I have today with me Courtni StarHeart. Thank you so much for being with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And just a quick background of who you are for our listeners so they can connect, and then we can begin our conversation if that's okay.
I would love that. And thank you for guiding me. I'll try to be a good dance partner through this little thing that we're doing here. And you can always guide me if I get unruly. I am a traditionally trained medicine person. There's a lot of confusion today about what that means. A lot of people are calling themselves medicine people. So maybe the first thing that we can do is kind of debunk what that actually means a little bit. It is a very specific tribal Native American term. Just because you're a medicine carrier or you're serving plant medicine does not make you a medicine person. It's a very specific Native American practice of training people to be like a tribal doctor. In my tradition, I studied for almost 20 years, and that was after 20 years of studying before that, and a couple of degrees from American University, 2 years of a doctoral degree, and just a lot of self-work. So it included all kinds of different things. Oh my gosh, I don't know where to start. Physiology, chemistry, biology, 5 years of study with Susan Weed to learn about herbalism in the wise woman tradition, which I'm so proud of. That's one of my favorite things, by the way, is the part of herbalism and women's health, reproductive, family, nutrition, holistic health. It encompasses, in our way of thinking, so many things that I think in Western culture we don't look at. So there's that part about it, the health part. Then there is the understanding Native traditions and Native culture. I wasn't born on a reservation, but my grandmother was Native American. So there's the part about, do we have to actually be full-blood Native to be a tribal medicine person? The answer is no. It's kind of like Judaism, right? You can convert, but you would have to convert to Judaism first before you could be a rabbi. So you can convert essentially to Native religion and then study. And there are lots of amazing practitioners who've done that. So it's really not about blood quanta, but it is about Native lineage. So my elder comes from the Piro Manso Tiwa tradition, which was from Taos Pueblo originally. There was a revolt, and when they pushed the Spanish out, they actually pushed out some of their brethren who didn't want the violence. So those who were pacifists were marched down the road with the Spanish, and that was Patricio Dominguez. He was in the spirit molecule, and in the native world, he's super famous for the eagle condor gatherings. The actual real ones, by the way, which also people are ripping off and saying that they're doing eagle condor gatherings, which also slays me. But it's like the Wild West. Like, there is no one to enforce any type of sanity. So I guess after all of that, right, saying that, what did I first learn from Patricio? Native culture, oral tradition, we don't have an actual book like a manual for training medicine people. We allow the universe to bring us the things that we need. So if someone comes to me with stage 4 cancer and they need help, I go to my elder and I say, what would we have done traditionally to help this person? And then case by case, these things wash up and that becomes the guide. Um, but it was 20 years. And I obviously still study with him and learn from him. And it's really important to me about the native traditions. A lot of my ancestors were killed during the conquest, and we almost lost our thread to our ancient oral traditions. So it's a pleasure, an honor, and a complete privilege that can be taken away anytime too. Like the elders don't just give you carte blanche. Like if you do something crummy and they find out about it, you can expect to go to like, shaman jail, get a red card, sit in the box for a while, have to promise to mend your ways. And there's that supervision within the native community, if that makes sense, right?
Totally makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing. I think I may have found my person to really dig into the native traditions, because I've been looking for somebody who can really speak to that. And because at the moment in the psychedelic space, as you're aware of, we have all these approaches, right? Clinical, medical, and we have churches, and then we have the underground, and then we have the psychotherapeutic, psychedelic-assisted therapy. It's kind of a little bit overwhelming, I guess, especially for our listeners who don't have that much experience and understanding. And of course, if they are relying on looking at the studies and the research, media, articles, academic publishing pages, it's really a lot out there, right?
Immense. It's vast and deep and wide, and everyone is kind of making a grab, like a power grab. And it's kind of like a freaking gold rush stampede. And I've been trampled myself during several iterations of this gold rush. Um, and if I didn't truly, truly love and like believe into the depths of my soul in what I do, I would have gotten a day job like 10 years ago, at least.
Yeah, totally. I was having a conversation with a previous guest, actually, and I had this question, what does he think about when we are now hearing and seeing a lot of medicine facilitators are saying, if they are facilitator of a psilocybin medicine, they would say psilocybin is the best. If they are, facilitator of ayahuasca, they'll say only ayahuasca will cure, nothing else. It's the only powerful. If it's a 5-MeO, they say, oh, it's the God molecule. There is no other stronger medicine than this. If it's iboga, it's like, you
Right?
just don't know. People are so confused. They don't know what to think. And also the experiences are not really clarified, because, a random person can post on a YouTube or a TikTok or Instagram, or write these long, complex blogs on Medium about their jungle experience,
And
right?
suddenly they're like authorities, right? They come back from like a trip to Costa Rica as full on medicine people ready to serve. I'm terrified. Like it actually makes me physically ill to think about it. And I have to control myself. I really have to practice, the finding the forest and the deep breath work and be like, okay, spirit, like how can I help? Like show me how we can help to make this better. It's terrifying. And it's also really deeply offensive to me as a Native person. And I don't like using that word because usually when someone says I'm offended, that means they're a jerk and they're trying to blame it on you because they're upset about something that's an internal process. They don't really believe in the being offended thing. But if you think about it from a Native point of view, like after our land was taken, after they killed the buffalo, after they murdered us, after they stalked us, um, like animals, classified us as livestock so that it would be illegal to murder us, and jammed Catholicism down our throat at sword point, gave us names like Dominguez and Vasquez. They took away our native names. They killed the men. They tried to kill all the medicine people. They raped the women. So if I have cream in my coffee, so to speak, as a Native woman, if I'm not as dark as other people, that's because my ancestors were forced to mate with the Spanish. So there are all of these wild things going on that people really don't understand. And after all of those things were taken from us, now as we're starting to recover our cultures, recover our dignity, our languages, our oral tradition, then people come along and take the sacredest of sacred things and they turn it into 7-Eleven. How can you take plant medicine and cheapen it that way with an honest conscience?
What is going on, do you think?
There's like a lot of things going on right now. I guess you've noticed. Like all you have to do is walk out the door to notice the actual shit show. Um, and so, like the oral tradition from my neck of the woods in the Southwest and the Four Corners, there were tribes out there like the Hopi and the Zuni and some of the Pueblos that they have their oral tradition intact. And my elder comes from an uninterrupted oral tradition. And then he, and actually with my help too, and Adam Yellowbird made these international intertribal councils. So we have access to the oral tradition of pre-Columbian times. So according to said oral tradition, we're kind of at like the butthole of a cycle of time. And if you want to call it the Kali Yuga, like the Vedic system, our systems are the same, the 26,000 year, 52,000 year cycle. So we can actually expect to be seeing the mess that we're seeing right now. And we're supposed to be going through a transformation. So they say that humanity has blown this particular transformational opportunity at least 5 times and blown the world up. And we're in like the 5th or 6th cycle of this ridiculous thing. I think what's going on is that human beings have an Achilles heel. And I think that's the amygdala. It's the fear. It's that othering. It's the lack of the teaching. In the absence of good stories and good oral tradition and good culture, we become very easy to manipulate and kind of assholic. And we've over multiplied. We've made the mistake of thinking that our resources are infinite. Wrong. The way ayahuasca is being treated is the exact same way everything else has been treated. They're cutting down old growth forest and killing entire ecosystems to chop down these huge vines that have almost no medicine. You don't chop down like a big vine, it's mostly bark. So if you're working sustainably with it, you should have a farm where you plant two for every one that you take out. And much like we do in herbalism, like with raspberry, we don't take the big thick vines, we take the second and first year whips because they have the highest concentration of medicine and it's doing the least damage to the ecosystem. Does that make sense?
Absolutely makes sense. And when you say oral tradition, you mean lineage that is passed on.
1,000%. So it's funny, not funny, because we're literally at that intersection where we're about to blow ourselves up again. So trust me, that's a nervous laugh. But the nervous laugh is about the elders passing on this oral tradition about what we've done wrong before. And we have access to these oral traditions from these different tribes. So whether it's the Inca or it's the Amazonian or it's the most remote people, they all have these oral traditions about this particular juncture in the space-time continuum. And yeah, oral tradition
Nice.
uninterrupted. So that's been our mission. What I studied in college, right? I was a National Merit Scholar. So the cool thing that I bring to the table is I'm half white, half Native, like half European and half Indigenous. And I'm bilingual, right? Spanish was my first language and then English. And I'm an academic and I'm an in the trenches actual medicine person. Like I would have been a tribal witch doctor. We called ourselves spiritual lawyers, though, by the way, and it was a matriarchal tradition, and the women carried that up and until the conquest, and then Patricio ended up getting it, and then he passed it on to me. Of course, as a woman, he wanted it to go back into the right people's hands, which I thought was beautiful. But uninterrupted oral tradition. Oh, college, American University, School of International Service. I studied culture. So I actually have this lens, this way of looking at culture and kind of understanding culture in a special way, and then being an actual participant. Because a lot of the academics went out and studied the Indians and then put their stuff in museums, which again kind of makes me like hop and mad when I go to the Museum of Natural History and I see like chanupas and uber sacred items like on display. It weirds me out that that's a thing. But anyway, most of the academics went out and studied and then wrote books, made a bunch of money, and never fully understood. They were judging the natives from the lens of the white man, from the like really kind of very Germanic, Cartesian, white way of thinking, right? And so they got most of it wrong, but they ripped it off, they ran off, and they published a bunch of bullshit about it without understanding it. So I did it the feminine way, which is the way of immersion, diving in. But I
Yeah.
do have the academic background, so I can translate things and kind of structurize them.
Do you find that's really important and it's kind of your leverage in the work that you do?
100%. I'm the only person who's offering, I think, the appropriate training, which is giving people a toolkit and a set of skills. If you're in a native village, in that setting, you would have already acquired these skills as a small child. And a lot of the oral tradition, like the stories, the big stories, they carry information, they carry tools. Ah, that was the thing. The elders don't write things down because the last time that we blew ourselves up, they said, it was because we wrote stuff down and we abused the writing system, and we lost that privilege. We don't record things in writing anymore
I
because of that.
understand. I understand. So in the oral tradition, would you say that, let's say, it's being passed on lineage through the lineage? Let's say, for example, the way you understand it and the way you observe and the way you put it into your toolbox, or how can I say it? The way that you would turn it into your medicine will be very different than, let's say, if you had a sister or if you had a brother or if you had a daughter, let's say. Do you have that in the, so is that something that is acknowledged, that some people have a natural knack towards, being the medicine woman or a man?
Yes.
Therefore, there is a choice. Therefore, maybe there is a choice. Maybe there is a path that one can take and decide not to, I guess. I'm just kind of trying to understand how, how was the medicine man and woman were defined? If you look at the
In tribal setting.
exactly, if you look at the Eastern traditions, they pick, for example, Dalai Lama was picked by some elders. Do you have similar?
Yeah, the Buddhist traditions are really interesting, because it is kind of similar in the sense that when a great medicine woman or man passed, they would anticipate their return and look for those signs like they would with the Karmapa or the Dalai Lama, that there was a lineage of energy, like an unbroken chain throughout time, you know, and also not necessarily fixating on that particular person, but more the energy. So there would be certain tells, and we would have a council of aunties basically. And whether it was Southwestern or it was like Haudenosaunee and Mohawk, it was all run by women. There were very few cultures that were run by men.
Do
For
we know
whatever,
the reason? Do we know the reason?
because they were earth honoring. Love the mother is the reason why. If you love the mother earth, then you recognize like the life-giving properties of woman. And woman has the power to have a vision that goes beyond the physical. It comes more naturally to us. It's not exclusively woman. We could say that it's a yin quality that's more likely to manifest in women. And a lot of our great medicine people were what they call Winkte, which is twin spirit. So we try to embody both masculine and feminine principles. And it's not really about gender or sex. It's about when you find the force, you're finding the balance between the yin, the yang. That's what takes you to the Tao, right? The center thing. It seems that women are better at doing that. Also, because we were reluctant to kill. Like it's not very funny, maybe, but like one of the laws of the Indian world is you kill it, you eat it. So it's just everything is packed in there. Like you would only take the life of something that you had to because you need to eat. We didn't really believe in war. So before we would go to war, there would have to be a women's council and the women would decide because those were their babies. They nursed them, they birthed those children, and they felt that it was their responsibility to keep the earth good for the next 7 generations, that we're borrowing the earth from our great grandchildren. So that was part of it. Um,
That's very powerful, by the way.
it really is. It's deep.
Mm.
It is really deep. And the woman represents the sacred hoop, right? Because of our breasts being round, because of our bellies being round, um, our ability to work together. Women tend to work with one another in circle. We believe in circle rather than power over, it's power through and with.
Wow.
Anyway, I might
Wow.
have gone off track on that, but
I think it's going into the right direction. I've been thinking a lot about the existential mother concept and looking at the West and how we have moved away from this, and then now it's kind of pushed into the shadows, maybe, but it's still kind of very much alive in our psyche. And this conflict forever, this whole conflict about, the violent man, the patriarchy, and then the matriarchy, and all these conflicts that are going on still to this day. I've been thinking about the root level cause of this. Where are we going with this all? There was actually a lecture that I listened to. I can't remember exactly who the organization, but they were kind of supporting the indigenous way of carrying the medicine. And there was also criticism about why is it that South American indigenous people, usually there is a patriarchy in the medicine circle where the the medicine man would sit on a higher, sort of like a chair or a higher, whereas other women helpers would be on the floor type of setting. So that was really interesting to think about. Don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
there's a snowball's chance in hell percentage possibility of me getting on my knees to receive medicine from a man, to be clear. It reminds me of the Catholic Church. And I think a lot of these things that were programmed into us were programmed through the patriarchy of the Catholic Church. In South America, obviously, like widely Catholic. In the Southwest, we actually consider ourselves part of Mesoamerica, where I come from. So Chaco Canyon in the northwest of New Mexico out there marks kind of like the northwest corner of what was Mesoamerica. So what I say about South America essentially goes for our neck of the woods too. Um, it's really difficult to tease out the threads of what is Catholic and what is Native because we merged. And but I'm a fan of doing that because I've sat with pre-Columbian people who didn't get the toxic conquest program, and it's well worth sitting with them. It's wildly different. It's distinctly matriarchal. It smacks of the rainforest and the jaguar and the mountains. It's wild. It's untamed, like the wild woman stories, right? And it's extremely powerful when it's done in the proper way. Um, I think some of the stories that are a little bit less grumpy towards the men include that the men stepped forward as a human shield to protect us. Say something like Sundance in the Lakota tradition. I was a ghost dancer. We have to call it spirit dance to, respect the Lakota traditions. But Patricio had a list of requirements for me to gain mastery in at least 5 categories, and one of them was ceremonial dance. And you learn by doing. So ghost dance, spirit dance, dream dance, whatever. All of that was taken away. Remember Wounded Knee, where they came and killed all the moms and babies in the snow and the horror, all of that? That was over ghost dance because it was so powerful that it was frightening the government that we might actually be able to unify as a people under this great leader Wowoka, right? And they started all dancing together instead of killing each other the way the government had planned, because they literally put ancient enemies next to each other on reservations to continue to get us to be at each other's throats. Anyway, the dance tradition was headed up by men. And I think the grandmothers finally got the sun dance back like in the 90s. They finally said, okay, boys, you've been protecting us for long enough until you forgot that you were actually not in charge of this. So we could look at the men as being human shields, as protecting the women. We have the staff and the shield kind of theory, where if the woman's holding the staff, then the man holds the shield. So they create like that circle for us so that we're safe. But
Sounds very collaborative as well.
yeah, yeah. There are lots of ways of seeing things, and I'm not attached to any particular one. I just I want the patriarchy to take their boot off of our throats, so to speak, like Ginsburg said. Like, I don't have any particular complaint except for I just don't want to be subjugated.
Yeah, I hear you. I understand. Wow. So can we go into what are your thoughts on, I'm sure you have very strong thoughts around this, people serving medicine after having their first experience because the spirit told them that they're shamans or healers. What are your thoughts on that?
Did you download a menu psychically of all my hot buttons? I'm glad I did my meditation today. I actually went out
Yeah.
and had a nice long walk before our talk to clear my mind. Um, Grateful. Wow. Again, like, am I being repetitive to say that I'm absolutely terrified by the amount of things that can go wrong when people are doing that? I've had waves and waves of the victims of that mentality come to our church. In fact, I first started serving ayahuasca, studying ayahuasca with Patricio because of that, because of the waves of people being served medicine the wrong way, actually in South America, because this goes back 20 years now. And so first it was like people being inappropriate there, and then people coming back messed up. And now it's like every Tom, Dick, and Harry is buying synthetic feathers and proclaiming themselves a medicine person. Then people are running retreats really successfully with zero training. They're importing people. Like, I call it the Paco syndrome. Like, so imagine you're like a white business owner and you go to like the rainforest and you find Paco, and maybe he's like a painter, he's a carpenter, he's a plumber, but he looks right. So you take Paco back, you put a headdress on him, and you get Paco to sit up on that stand and serve ayahuasca, and you call him a Taita. And boom, you've got a business model. And so that diner 7-Eleven mentality is pretty much what's running things after the lawsuit, the civil lawsuit leveled against Soul Quest after the death of Brendan Bagley. I would think that people would start paying attention. I pray that people, but they're not actually. Like, more and more people are actually contacting me. People who are like 20, 25 years old, like, hey man, what's up? I'm a medicine person too, dig. Whoa, like, I just don't know what to say. I'm speechless. Like, the harm that they're doing to other people, the way that they're degrading the real thing, so as to where it's almost difficult for people to find a good practitioner. In this madding crowd of all people waving their hands, I'm a medicine person. How are you going to actually find one? So they're doing that disservice by making it harder and harder every day for people to find the real deal. And they're killing people. They're literally killing people. And the only thing worse than killing someone is giving them a psychotic break and then sending them home for their family to have to suffer. It's also
How,
disrespectful to the native people.
how can we eliminate some of this problem?
By wonderful people like you, like the work that you're doing. You're asking all of the right questions. So obviously, I'm not the first person or the last one that you're asking the good questions to. It's going to have to be education. And for better or for worse, it has to be done with kindness. It really does. It has to be done with the patience that you would address a 2-year-old with, because literally that's what we're dealing with, is like egomaniacs who just have no idea what they're doing. They think that it's like anything else, like, oh, I can just grab this and take it and take the special, make it mine, make it into a business model, churn and burn, and treat people kind of like dollar signs.
Yeah. I've been in the biohacking and self-development space for a good at least 20 years now. Started with Tony Robbins. I think everybody did, right? The firewalk in the 90s. And, I'm okay with people turning everything into business, like, whatever it is, biohack your health, sleep, nutrition, and all of that. But it's, using your words, terrifying to think that psychedelics are also thrown into that category of turning it around and then, you know. promoting as a business tool. It's
And
really
the lateral
scary.
violence too between
Yeah.
practitioners. So people will do things like, if you get too far ahead, as I did in New Mexico, then the people who considered it their turf considered me a threat, put me on a plastic shaman page, and had people raining bullets on my house and sending rapists and drug dealers into our church. So that kind of violence towards anyone who's successful, who is legitimate, is seen as competition. And also the violence that the Spanish brought. I mean, I love Spain, don't get me wrong. Like, I lived in Barcelona. Spanish people are a different thing than what the Spanish did here during the conquest, to be clear. It's like Germans and like World War II Holocaust. It's not the same thing, right? So I'm not dogging the Spanish. I love the Spanish. But what the conquistadors did here was disgusting. And we're still living with the remnants of that war-torn, violent, murderous society. And the violence towards women is just all pervasive because that is a cultural program. And we're dealing with multiple layers of generational trauma that the Native communities are still trying to process. It's going to be a long time before Native America is right again. So I'm not even mad that that was how I was treated, because it's like, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do type of thing.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. This competition, let's stay there a little bit longer. There is
Uncomfortable
this,
place.
yeah, there is
Yeah.
this, there is this term that I'm really obsessing over lately, and I saw this amazing article by he goes by the pen name Garwinde on Substack, and he kind of summarized from medicine to politics to religious dealings to gender, everything in between. He wrote this amazing summary of where we are at the moment. And he called the state that the humanity is in at the moment, he called it neo-toddlerism.
Fair
I
enough.
thought it was the most creative thing I've ever read. Like you said, it's like a bunch of children just competing with one another, and this whole competition, and especially with the psychedelic medicine space, I kind of feel that, Courtney. I feel what is kind of going on, but obviously I try and avoid speaking it out here. But you're the first person I am kind of sharing my own thoughts and observations around that. I see it everywhere. Seems to be like cliquey people coming together, creating groups, teams, entrepreneurial ventures, organizations under .org and all kinds of nonprofit stuff. But they're so cliquey and they're so in a tight circle. They don't allow anyone else in, and they have, they've created their own rules and strategies to compete with others, and it's really insane. Honestly, it's really a mess out there.
It's quite the opposite of indigenous philosophy. Quite the opposite. And you have to wonder, what is the outcome of going against the grain of the natural consciousness of the plant medicine? Because the indigenous women and men who carried these medicines obviously had a profound relationship with the medicine. So they understood how the ayahuasca thinks. They understood that she has an agenda. They understood the pitfalls. They understood the different levels and layers of the spirit world. Another terrifying thing is how insane is it that you're going to take someone and like launch them out of a cannon, like that old circus thing? Uh, Bob, did you think about where you were sending that person before you launched them? Do you have a map of the spirit world, Poppy? No, you don't. You don't, because that's oral tradition, and that was only given to the sacerdotes, to the priests, to the shaman priests who proved themselves, because that was dangerous knowledge. The shaman's job was to protect the people from those dangers. not to launch them into the vast wilderness of the Pacific Ocean. And that's what people are doing. Not only are people doing that with no map of the spirit world or any relationship with the things that exist on the other side, because that's the other part of it. Like traditional shamanism, you're not getting anywhere near even pouring a sweat lodge until you have a relationship with the four directions, with the elements, with the earth, with the sky, with your inner world. They want to know that you're ethical. They'll push your buttons. They'll beat you with a stick to see how you respond, because getting hit in the head with a stick is a lot easier than running an ayahuasca ceremony properly. So they test your mettle, and they wouldn't give this information to just anybody. Anyway, people are lacing the medicine with different things. I think there were 20 young girls who died in Florida a few years back because somebody thought fentanyl in the ayahuasca was a great idea. There are people getting assaulted, murdered, raped, all these different things. Hogtied. I was asked to preside over a ceremony where people were hogtied. And I told them, if you don't untie those people, I'm calling the police myself. I mean, the things that I have heard in 20 years about the things that people are doing, it's just breathtaking. I have no words for it. The putting extra things in the medicine is really scary though, because there's so many things you can put in there that will actually really destroy a person's neurology long term.
What's the intention putting fentanyl into ayahuasca? Whose idea is that?
I think they had gotten the medicine off the dark web, so I guess some evil person felt like it would be funny to do that. Or they didn't know what they were putting in there. But I mean, it's tasteless, it's flavorless. The more common thing is Toei. The more common thing is obviously the Brugmansia is one common thing, and that's a zombification medicine. We work with Datura, which is Brugmansia's cousin. So I understand intimately what that plant family does. It slows your vitals, and it also opens up like the dark underbelly of the spirit world. And that's how we train to do extrications. Ooh, another fun topic. Why are we putting people in jeopardy in the spirit world when we have no psychic defense for them? Do people not understand that this is a portal? That when we open up this portal into the spirit world, the reason we call on the quarters and the reason why we work with these allies, which is what I was getting at, you're not allowed to work with medicine until you have allies. Why would I go into the jungle with a guide who doesn't know how to guide me and keep me safe? All of this is just insanity. I think there's such a level of desperation right now and a pressure for us to transform that people are desperate, praying for miracles, and they just don't know what they're doing. They're getting taken for a ride. They're getting sold a Brooklyn Bridge, basically. It's like an old joke in New York. I've got a bridge to sell you. When people come new to New York, they would try to sell them the Brooklyn Bridge, and it's kind of like what people are doing with ayahuasca.
Right, that's a good analogy. Would you say that the ultimate path with the psychedelic medicines, will always take us on a journey into the spirit world, regardless? Because the reason I'm asking you or sharing with you is because we have these biotech companies now removing the hallucinogenic effects of the psychedelic medicines and then putting them in capsules, and they don't want the hallucinogenic experiences for the patients with symptoms. They just want to give them in a capsule. I mean, isn't that distorting the medicine somewhat?
Anyone who has worked with sacred mushrooms and then taken a psilocybin extract will tell you right away that that doesn't work the same. And it would be the same thing with ayahuasca. The pharmawaska that they're trying to make. In fact, they have made, and I've got people hitting me up all the time as well, which is amusing. Oh, hey, I've got this pharmawaska. Oh, hey, I've got this, that. Not, not
There was
hallucination.
interestingly, I did read an article that they tried and tested or studied this group of people with early stages of dementia. Somehow this pill worked.
Which one?
I need to go back. I can't remember which it is, but they have created a pill now, removing the hallucinogenic effects, and now they did a trial with early stages of dementia. I must look and find that article. Now they're saying that it's proven that it's working.
Well, yay. I mean, nobody really needs to have to struggle with dementia, so that would be wonderful. But is it the same as having a very spiritual, beautiful, you know, experience with ayahuasca? No. But if it has the physical effect and no one is getting hurt, maybe that's nifty. I just feel like it's highly unlikely that I don't know. I just have this superstition perhaps that was instilled in me by the elders that if you're effing with nature, it's like the F around and find out thing.
Right.
There's going to be another shoe that drops. We're going to find out at a certain point that you're getting this, but it's taking that, like the list of counterindications or side effects from the different drugs, right? Like the Prozacs and the whatevers. Then there's like this list of like may cause death, may cause this, may cause. I think there's probably a list of maybe things that could go wrong with that, but we just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so early stages. Well, Courtney, can we speak about ayahuasca and the church? I love the name of the church. It's Church of the Natural Law. You are the founder of the church, and it is also so the ayahuasca is a sacrament of the church.
100%.
And this church is one of the very early ones that became a church with ayahuasca as a sacrament, if I understand it correctly.
Above board. There were a lot of different people doing it, but I was above board and transparently out there without the DEA permission, riding under the auspices of our First Amendment rights and, RFRA, Religious Freedom Restoration Act, right? Which only reconfirmed the actual fact that we're protected with religious freedom, First Amendment. I was pre-law and I worked for the state of Delaware for a long time doing legal stuff. So I'm really interested in the case law. Um, so I was a member of ONAC. And again, like, it's not nice to be negative, so I'm not gonna do that. But for good reasons, I left that organization. But while I was still with the Aclava Native American Church, so was Adam Yellowbird, and Patricio Dominguez and I had a branch together. And we had gone out to Arizona. Actually, I think it was Groundhog Day 2 years ago or something like that, or three, I forget. Right before they raided Adam Yellowbird's church. He was the grower, the provider of medicines for ONAC. And whether or not he was providing religious services with that medicine, the theory was that he should be allowed to keep that medicine because somebody needs to be able to safely distribute clean medicine, right? So we're out there right before they raid him, and we were working on the same thing that we're always working on, which is this international coalition of tribal medicine people. We have no representation as indigenous people at the UN, and that boggles my mind. Not one single tribe is represented in any international organization. We've kind of just been erased and taken out of any type of power place. So we keep on organizing and gathering and connecting. So the Church of the Natural Law came from the day that we sat down, the three of us, and we were going over these old treaties and all of the old traditional ways of looking at medicine. So we had written up this kind of treatise to connect the peoples, and we were going to call it the Church of the Natural Law and make an international organization to connect people, to also bolster our position that it's a religious act, right, as Native people. Um, there's a lot to it. Like all of those Eagle Condor gatherings, the real ones were done like in the 80s, 90s by Patricio, Flor de Mayo, and Mictu Bayon. These elders got the elders together. And what they said in those gatherings when they were finally together for the first time in like 500 years, because we used to gather, right? Especially at Chaco and those places. A lot of the dance arenas were like little mini UNs. It's just that we would dance and like do medicine and connect spiritually before we would go into the business aspect of things, right? But there were business meetings basically. Anyway, we always organize at an international level, and we're trying to restore the trade routes. That was a big thing with Adam. He was trying to be able to get the medicines through based on intertribal connections, have a separate passport for indigenous tribal people so that we could transport medicines the way that we used to before these borders were forced on us. Does that make sense?
Does absolutely make sense.
And so out came the Church of the Natural Law, because we're talking about the natural laws and speaking to the government, speaking to the DEA regulations, and trying to look at specifically Nancy, I think it's Calhoun's decision. She was the one who wrote the decision on the case out of New Mexico that got the DEA forced to give permission to the one church. I think it was UDV, União de Vegetal, that was that case.
Right. Well, congratulations. You have the church and the protected medicine under the law.
I hope so. I believe so. I mean, we are following all of the recommendations of that judge in her decision in terms of what she found to be like the characteristic, the fundamental aspects of protection. Like they want people to be safe. They want it to be a spiritual ceremony, and they want it to not be distributed, right? So they didn't want the medicines getting out on the street and being sold as drugs because it's a scheduled substance. So it had to be in a religious context. And the context, presumably, was a very specific one, which was indigenous. So it kind of blows my mind that people think that they're protected under like their First Amendment rights when they have no indigenous training. Like, I truly believe that people are not supposed to be protected if they're not doing it in the proper context. And there's only one context under her decision. They brought people from the rainforest. There's this wonderful documentary about it, and you're literally seeing these Amazonian tribal elders in full regalia sitting on the witness stand speaking to this wonderful judge. Her decision just is like so Ginsburg, like so brilliant. She's still alive too and practicing. I got to talk to the man who was her clerk on that case. He was just out of law school, and he's a little bit older than me. So I got to go in and speak with him. He felt that the defining characteristic was that they were practicing an indigenous tradition with a specific lineage and history of working with that medicine that way.
Yeah, it's profound. So would you say that there are, obviously for our listeners that are not familiar with the US laws, you can become a church and you can have your medicine as your sacrament under the church. So would you say that in the US, there are now many, many churches popping up with psychedelic sacrament as, you know, as their psychedelic medicine as their sacrament? So would you say that they don't always come from an indigenous lineage? It's still it's like finding a loophole because obviously the legal system is so strict. I'm aware that US is doing a great job, by the way. There's a lot of decriminalization and activism going on to bring the medicine to you know, to have it accessible. I understand that, but I think, would you say that it's possible that some people might take that route just so that they can navigate the system?
Yeah, sure. It's a convenient loophole for someone to use a capitalist business model on it. And since it's not being heavily enforced and policed, I mean, I've heard dozens of people who are like the kind of like crackerjack ayahuasca practitioners getting arrested. Um, I don't know where to go with it. Like I'm just devastated that it's like a bad case of cucarachas. Like once you see one cockroach, you know there are 10,000. So for every ayahuasca church that we can see who's running it as a business model, there are 10,000 people practicing in Uncle Bob's shed out back who are serving ayahuasca for $50. Okay. I mean, it's kind of distressing because then people expect me to be able to run an actual church and give appropriate services for $50. Like one serving of the ayahuasca I get because I support the village, because I know where it comes from, and because I'm honoring the medicine and making sure it's done sustainably. One dose is $150. So am I going to pay you to come and sit for ayahuasca with me? And again, I don't live in a village. My landlord doesn't take chickens for rent or goodwill. And so people are doing a really slop job of serving the medicine, and it's undercutting um, people's ability to make good choices because they have inappropriate expectations.
Right. Yeah. And this is very serious. I'm very aware of this happening everywhere. It's like, at any given moment, somebody's serving in their backyard
Yeah,
this
like in Michael
medicine.
Pollan's book, it was like 20 years ago. He said there was probably 1,000 ceremonies every Friday night in Manhattan and the boroughs. That was 20 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's happening now.
We can only assume it's vastly multiplied. And
Right.
people are being less and less ashamed of it. There's someone not far away from here who's got like thousands of complaints against her on Reddit. People have actually formed a group complaining about her. Now, people have also made a lot of complaints about me. So initially I was like, oh, this poor young woman. And as I mentioned earlier, the anger and rage towards women is disproportional. Chris Young killed someone and people are still defending him and still crying, oh, Soul Quest shut down. Finally, sorry. I know that's not going to be popular with some people, and I hope no one decides to stalk me because I have a big mouth. But at the same time, this young woman not far away from me, the rage towards her, rage, thousands of complaints. You know what they're complaining about? She asked them to sit down and be quiet.
Mm. Back to the neo-toddlerism perspective. All the
Yes, I don't
toddlers.
know what really went on at her retreat. I can't vouch for it. I've never been there, but I see the amount of rage. Also, she has no indigenous traditions, none, no training, and I think has been serving since she was 25 years old, which completely rules out any possibility of having studied for the requisite 15 years. That's the bare minimum to serve medicine. So
Wow.
here's a good way for people to figure it out. My favorite three questions. Which indigenous elder did you study with and for how long? Do you still have a good relationship with them? Like, do you have them on speed dial? Right? Are you an herbalist? How can you serve plant medicine without being a master herbalist? And
That, yeah.
you have a map of the spirit world. Do you know where you're taking me?
Those are
Those are
good
my three.
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then look how old they are. Look, if they don't have some gray hair and wrinkles, forget about it. Pay the money that you need to pay, whether that's 2,000 or 5,000 or 10,000. Forget about the money. Look at the quality of the experience. Because the people who are real practitioners are probably not charging 50 bucks.
Right. Yeah,
And they're not 20.
for sure. Thank you so much, Courtney. This has been very, very insightful and enlightening. Thank you for being very transparent and speaking your mind. I think this is very important, especially as things are getting really, really messy out there in the space of psychedelic work. I
Yeah.
appreciate you. So, as we come to the end of our conversation, I probably can stay here for another hour. I know. So, probably will. I think it would be amazing to have you back very soon for part two. Maybe we should continue having these conversations to provide overview of each, every so often, so that people can stay informed. That would be amazing.
Yes, I would love to. And I mean, talking maybe next time more about community and the positive things that are happening, people are making the attempts, to kind of like galvanize community and to, do things the right way. I've seen at least some psychedelic societies where I feel like they're making a legitimate, honest attempt. There is also a tendency for it to be patriarchal, dominated, and linear, power over, and then people sucking the money out of the organization. So the same abuses that are going on everywhere else are rampant in every aspect of our culture because it's just like all pervasive.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, there are people who are trying to do the right things, and I would love to talk about what it looks like when people are getting it right. Since this was like a little bit grumpy session,
To be honest, I think we are closing on a positive note. We're saying that there are actually amazing work also being done out there.
Very much so. There are a lot of people who are very loving, very kind, and have their hearts in the right place. And a few of them actually have indigenous training.
Amazing. So for sure. So for the part two, we'll kind of do the positive review. But before we let you go, please tell us about your work, your projects, and how can our listeners find you, and what are the things that you are offering at the moment?
Thank you. My favorite thing that I'm offering at the moment is um, spiritual consulting. Right. Um, I don't love the word coaching, but that is the word that people use. So I do one-on-ones with high-level business women mostly, but men too. Um, it's a 6-week training package, um, and it's between $5,000 and $6,000, depending on what your needs are. And it includes a very small group ayahuasca session at our beautiful church sanctuary on Long Island. So we have an acre and a half of land in a walnut grove in a historic farmhouse, 45 minutes from JFK on the North Shore of Long Island, which means we have beaches, we have restaurants, we have all this wonderful stuff. And you would never know that Manhattan is 35 minutes from here, right? But it's great because people can come from all over the world and work with me. We work at a distance first. I have clients from Japan. I have clients from Germany. I have clients from all over the world. And it's great because we can work virtually and get them prepared and kind of download the app. I call it Finding the Force. So it's a 4-step system and process that's based on the medicine wheel. The medicine wheel is, shaped like the compass. We have the 4 directions, but they're actually 4 concepts and they're 4 keys that we stack to turn on this 10G type of access to higher data, if you want to use modern terms. I call it the force, right? So I teach people how to find the force before they come to ceremony. I teach people the habits they need, and then we do a very quiet, very peaceful, very clean, pretty, because we have bedrooms, we have toilets, and each person gets their own bed type of thing. Um, and we have a really good ratio too with staff. So it's usually 1-to-1 or 2-to-1, somewhere in there, because we have a lot of people studying with us and training. So that's my favorite thing to do. I go out and do presentations too. We have this is so cute. We have this journey to Diamond Island. So I take people on a drum journey and we have a digital toolkit that they go home with. So we do it in groups. And it's like a simulated psychedelic experience with a drum. And then they have a toolkit that allows them to go back again and again, like in this soundscape hypnotic journey. And they keep on learning more and more about their inner terrain until it feels more comfortable. It's kind of like learning how to steer a ship, right? Or drive a car, ride a bike. You have to practice it before your, inner authority, your inner game. You can build those muscles until it becomes pretty natural. And I have people put a lot of pins in the map before they take the medicine. And then we also do it a very specific way. No one kneels at my feet. And I don't force them to gulp all of the medicine. My clients will tell me that they go to these retreats and the guy will be like, no, drink it all. And you're like, Paco, like one size doesn't fit all. Like people have different sensitivities. Everyone's wildly different and they should be allowed to titrate. So I have people sip on the medicine. So, but once we've established the baseline MAOI, you have to get the inhibitor in the system. And I'm not going to talk about my secret sauce for how I do that, but there's a lot less purging at my retreats than at other retreats. We also work with combo first, which is incredibly helpful to pull everything out of the system first. I don't know. I like heart math, to be honest, these little devices. My high-end corporate clients and business owners, I teach them how to use this because heart math proves that our brain heart coherence is what gets us into the force, right?
I love that. Get us all coherent and aligned.
Yeah, it's more than
Mhm.
medicine.
Mhm. I love that. Indigenous complementing the science and everything else in between. This is great. Thank you so much. I love that. And look forward to having you back very soon.
Thank you so much. It's really been delightful. And thank you for asking the right questions that people are uncomfortable asking. Thank you for helping people.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the feedback and encouragement. What would you like to leave our listeners with? Your last words, what would that be?
Finding the force is a daily practice. The ayahuasca can kick the door open for you so that you know where to find it, but you have to build your own spiritual muscles. The mind is the yoke between the spirit plane and the body, right? And you have to build those muscles yourself. I would say the most important thing to know is the medicine does have this kind of "what have you done for me lately" attitude. Like, if you're not coming to the dance able to do your part, she's not going to do anything for you that you haven't done for yourself or that you wouldn't do for her. So, by honoring the medicine, by loving the mother, or by finding the force on your own, you're honoring the sacredness of it. And you're going to get a lot more out of it too, because you've done your spiritual push ups. So,
I love that. Thank you very much. And yeah, we'll speak to you very soon.
okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Courtney. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. I hope it wasn't so triggery and a little bit bumpy and dark. But, that's how we get to the truth. We need to go to the uncomfortable places. And hope you enjoyed it. And please do comment, share if there's anything you want to add to. Feedback, all welcome. Don't be shy. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye for now.